Hi, Taurus. I have to be honest, the energy in this reading feels pretty special. When the first cards came out, I actually sat with them a little longer before pulling the rest of the spread. Because whatever is coming through here doesn't feel small. It feels like something is shifting within an important connection. Like someone is looking back at the past through a completely different lens. Someone who once overlooked what truly mattered is starting to see things with much more clarity. And if you happen to find this message today, honestly, I don't think it's just a coincidence. The energy here feels like a new chapter is slowly beginning to unfold. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly. And very, very genuinely. So take a few moments for yourself. Get comfortable. Maybe grab a cup of coffee or tea. Take a deep breath. And let's see what these cards want to share. Because, wow. The feeling that's coming through here is almost like someone is finally beginning to understand something that took them a very long time to recognize. And as I look down at the cards in front of me, the very first thing that comes through isn't an action. It's not a message. It's not even a meeting. It's realization. A very slow realization. A very honest one. Like someone spent so much time chasing what they thought they needed that they lost sight of what actually brought peace to their heart. I'm seeing someone sitting alone with their thoughts. No one around them. No friends weighing in. No outside advice. Just them. And memories that can no longer be pushed aside. The Six of Cups card comes through very gently here. And what's interesting is that this energy doesn't feel like someone wanting to go back and relive the past. Not at all. It feels more like they're looking back at everything through completely different eyes. Things they once took for granted. Acts of kindness they assumed would always be there. Moments they once believed weren't all that important. The more they reflect on them now, the more they realize how rare those things actually were. Taurus. Feels like this person is beginning to understand that not everyone made them feel accepted the way you did. Not everyone gave them that same sense of safety. Not everyone allowed them to be themselves without constantly feeling like they had something to prove. And that realization is changing a lot inside of them. Something shifts when the Judgment card appears. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's actually very private. Almost like someone waking up on an ordinary morning and suddenly realizing they don't think the same way they used to. The things they once believed, the choices they once made, the things they once walked away from. Everything begins to appear under a different light. I'm seeing this person replay old conversations in their mind. Small moments they barely paid attention to before. The times you tried to understand them. The times you were more patient than you needed to be. The times you stayed when things became difficult. And the more they remember, the more something catches in their chest. Not because they want to live in regret, but because, for the first time, they're truly seeing the value of those moments. This energy becomes even clearer when the Hierophant card comes through. And honestly, I don't see impulsiveness here. I don't see temporary emotions. I see someone beginning to think much more seriously about what they actually want to build in their life. It's like they've experienced enough of the things that left them exhausted. Enough distractions. Enough shiny things. Enough choices that pulled them away from what mattered. Enough stories that never really went anywhere. And now they're asking themselves a very simple question. What actually matters? And when that question appears, Taurus, your energy shows up very clearly. Not because you're perfect. Not because you've never made mistakes. But because you're real. You're consistent. You're the kind of person people feel they can lean on. And strangely enough, the things they once viewed as ordinary are becoming the very things they can't seem to find anywhere else. Something begins to fall away when the Ace of Swords card appears. It's like a fog that's been hanging around for far too long finally starts to lift. The excuses, the justifications, the delays, the fears, they're slowly losing their grip. This person is becoming more honest with themselves. And, wow, sometimes the truth is much simpler than all the stories we tell ourselves. Because I think the truth they're facing right now is that they underestimated a connection that meant far more to them than they realized. They thought they had more time. They thought these feelings would eventually fade. They thought they could keep moving forward without ever looking back. But their heart seems to be telling a different story. A slower story. A more mature story. A much more honest one. Because this person no longer wants to keep missing something they're finally beginning to understand the value of. And that feeling, well, that's only the beginning of what's starting to change inside of them. I'm seeing a silence here, but not the comfortable kind. This feels like the silence that arrives when someone can no longer keep running from themselves. There are emotions they've been pushing down for a very long time. Memories they convinced themselves they had already moved past. Choices they once told themselves were the right ones. But this energy is showing me that everything is starting to come back to the surface, not to punish them, but to help them finally see. The Hermit card threw very strongly here, and I'm seeing someone walking alone. No one left to blame, no one left to ask what they should do. Just the thoughts they've been avoiding for a very long time. What's interesting is that the more time they spend alone, the more they remember the things that once seemed insignificant. A conversation, a glance, a simple moment shared between two people. The things they once took for granted are now the very things they can't stop thinking about. Something shifts when the Five of Cups card appears. I see someone looking back, not because they want to live in regret forever, but because, for the first time, they truly understand the value of what they lost. Sometimes people don't realize how important something was until it's no longer there, and honestly, this feels a lot like that. They're looking back at an older version of themselves, a version that always believed there would be more time, a version that assumed everything would stay exactly where it was, a version that never fully understood the cost of silence. The more they reflect, the more they realize that many of their past decisions weren't made from wisdom. They were made from fear, fear of getting hurt, fear of facing their true feelings, fear of committing to something that mattered too much, fear of changing a life that had become familiar. And because of those fears, they chose the easier path. At least, it seemed easier back then. But what once felt easier has become the very thing that weighs on their heart now. This picture becomes even clearer when the Nine of Swords card appears. The energy here is quiet. But inside, there are conversations that never seem to end. I see them waking up with unfinished thoughts, trying to focus on work while their mind drifts somewhere else. Questions keep showing up. What if I had done things differently? What if I had been more honest? What if I hadn't given up so quickly? This is no longer about who was right or who was wrong. This is about someone growing through the things they wish they had handled differently. And Taurus, your presence feels very strong in their thoughts, not in an obsessive way, not in an idealized way, but in a very human way. You've become a reference point for them, a reminder of what actually brings peace, a reminder of what genuine connection feels like. Something begins to move when the Eight of Cups card comes through. And wow, I don't see them running anymore. I don't see them trying to fill empty spaces with distractions. Instead, I see someone turning inward. Someone slowly realizing that happiness can't be built on constantly avoiding what the heart is trying to say. This energy gives me the feeling of a door closing behind them. Not the door to a relationship, but the door to an older version of themselves. The version that ran whenever things became too real. The version that chose the safety of fear over the honesty of emotion. And as that door slowly closes, I can feel something else beginning to form, a new maturity, a new courage, a new desire. Because sometimes loss doesn't only break our hearts. Sometimes it teaches us what is truly worth holding on to. And this person, well, they're finally beginning to understand that. I'm seeing the energy shift very clearly here. This no longer feels like someone sitting in the past. It no longer feels like those endless loops of thoughts going nowhere. Instead, it feels like after a long season of facing themselves, they're beginning to ask a different question. Okay, so what do I do now? This energy of me showing me someone slowly getting back on their feet after a period of deep inner change. Not everything is perfect. Not every problem has been solved, but they don't want to live in hesitation anymore. Something changes when the Eight of Pentacles card comes through. I see them becoming more focused, more serious, more grounded. The things they used to leave unfinished are now being completed one step at a time. Plans that once existed only in their mind are starting to take shape in the real world. And honestly, what stands out most is that they're no longer looking for shortcuts. I'm seeing someone accept that if they want their life to be different, they have to build it, step by step, day by day, choice by choice. Taurus, this person is beginning to realize that feelings alone aren't enough. Love alone isn't enough. Promises alone aren't enough. They're starting to understand that a meaningful connection needs something solid beneath it. It needs a foundation. And that's exactly what they're trying to create. This picture becomes even clearer when the Three of Pentacles card appears. I'm seeing them look at life from a completely different perspective. Maybe there was a time when they believed everything would simply fall into place on its own. But now they're realizing that the things that truly matter require effort. They need attention. They need care. They need to be built. It feels like this person is learning how to become someone more dependable, someone who keeps their word, someone who takes responsibility, someone who doesn't disappear the moment things become serious. I also see them spending a great deal of time stabilizing the practical parts of their life. Work, finances, their living situation, long-term goals. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because, for the first time, They understand what it feels like to prepare for something bigger than themselves. Something shifts when the King of Pentacles card comes through. This energy feels steady, calm, quiet. There's nothing flashy about it, nothing performative. I'm seeing someone gradually becoming the kind of person they once hoped to meet themselves. The kind of person who makes others feel safe. The kind of person who offers stability instead of uncertainty, and this didn't happen overnight. It came from lessons. A lot of lessons. A lot of mistakes. A lot of moments spent looking in the mirror and admitting what needed to change. And Taurus, your energy shows up very strongly here, because whenever they think about the future, they're no longer imagining vague fantasies. They're no longer dreaming about distant possibilities. I'm seeing something much simpler. A peaceful life, a trustworthy partner, a place that feels like home, a connection strong enough to weather difficult seasons, and somehow, every road seems to lead them back toward you. The energy grows even stronger when the Emperor card appears. Wow, this feels different, more mature, more decisive, more responsible. It's like they no longer want life to simply happen to them. They want to take the wheel. They want direction. They want ownership over the choices they make. This energy gives me the feeling of someone preparing quietly behind the scenes, not saying much, not showing much, but changing in ways that matter. I see them looking back at the road they've traveled, and for the first time in a long while, they're not only thinking about what they want, they're thinking about what they can offer, what they can build, what they can protect, what they can contribute. Because a part of them is beginning to understand something important. If they ever choose to move toward Taurus, they don't want to return as the same version of themselves. They don't want to come back empty-handed. They want to show up with something stronger, a stronger foundation, a more mature heart, a life they've genuinely spent time building, not to prove anything, not to earn approval, but because they're slowly becoming the person this connection has been encouraging them to become all along. I'm seeing a very different energy coming through now, lighter, more open, and honestly, much braver. It feels like after everything that's been happening inside of them, after all the moments they've spent facing themselves, they're approaching a point where they can no longer keep everything locked away. This energy is showing me someone preparing to say something. Not the perfect words, not a carefully rehearsed speech, just the truth. Something shifts when the Page of Cups card appears. I see them sitting alone, playing out different scenarios in their mind, thinking about how a conversation might go, thinking about how Taurus might respond, thinking about the questions that could come up. And what stands out the most is that this nervousness isn't coming from pride. It's coming from genuine care. Because when someone truly no longer cares, they don't spend this much time thinking about what to say. But this person does. They're weighing every word, every approach, every step. And wow, there's a little bit of excitement mixed in here too. Almost like they know this conversation could change a lot. It could open the door to a new chapter. It could finally allow them to say the things they've been carrying for far too long. This picture becomes clearer when the Knight of Cups card comes through. The energy starts moving. I no longer see them standing still. I no longer see the same delays that used to hold everything back. Instead, I'm seeing someone slowly moving closer to what their heart truly wants. What's interesting is that they don't want to show up pretending to be perfect. They know they've made mistakes. They know there were things that should have been said sooner. Decisions that probably should have been made a long time ago. But instead of continuing to avoid those truths, they're beginning to face them. I see a very sincere energy here. Someone who no longer wants to hide their feelings behind silence. Someone who no longer wants Taurus to keep guessing what they're thinking. It feels like they're preparing to reopen a door they once closed themselves. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage. This energy is showing me words that were never spoken, explanations that were never given, apologies left unfinished. Not because they want to rewrite the past, but because they don't want to carry those unspoken things into the future. Something changes when the Eight of Wands card appears. Everything starts gaining momentum, not in a chaotic way, more like the energy of someone who has finally made a decision. I see movement, a lot of movement, thoughts becoming organized, plans beginning to form, a sense of direction that wasn't there before. This person no longer feels stuck at a crossroads. They're beginning to understand where they want to go, and that realization changes everything. Maybe they're typing out a message and deleting it, then writing it again. Maybe they're thinking about meeting face to face. Maybe they're preparing for a conversation they know they can't postpone any longer. But regardless of the form it takes, the feeling underneath remains the same. They want to move toward Taurus. Not through mixed signals, not through half-hearted efforts, but through genuine presence, through showing up. This energy becomes strongest when the Chariot card comes through. And honestly, This is the moment where I feel them breaking free from the things that used to hold them back. The fear is still there. The nervousness is still there, but for the first time in a very long time, those emotions are no longer driving the car. I'm seeing someone take hold of the wheel of their own life. I'm seeing them stop waiting for the perfect circumstances. Stop waiting for the perfect timing. Stop waiting for a perfect version of themselves. Because sometimes the most important thing isn't perfection. It's being honest enough to walk toward the person you genuinely want to see. And the feeling here, well, it feels like a door is slowly opening. Not through grand promises, not through dramatic declarations, but through real steps being taken in a real direction. And this person seems far more ready now than they've ever been before to walk through that door. I'm seeing a very deep shift happening inside of them now. Not the kind of change that everyone around them would immediately notice. This feels more like a change in the way they listen to themselves. Because for a very long time, it feels like this person has been living among too many voices. The voice of family, the voice of friends, the voice of expectations, the voice of who they thought they were supposed to be. And when there are that many voices speaking at once, sometimes people forget what their own heart actually sounds like. Something changes when the High Priestess card appears. Everything becomes quieter. Not empty, just quieter. I'm seeing someone who no longer feels the need to search outside of themselves for every answer. No longer asking everyone else what they should do. No longer trying to gain approval from every direction. Instead, they're beginning to sit with themselves, to listen to their feelings, to listen to the things they've ignored for far too long. And what's interesting is that the more they listen, the more they realize something very simple. Some things they've known all along. They just weren't ready to admit them before. This energy is showing me someone who is finally stopping the argument with their own heart, stopping the search for reasons to deny what they feel, stopping the attempt to convince themselves that these feelings would eventually disappear, because they didn't disappear. They stayed, quietly, patiently, waiting for them to be ready. The picture becomes even clearer when the Justice card comes through. I'm seeing them reflect on many of the choices they've made throughout their life, not with blame, not with anger, but with maturity, almost like they're asking themselves, why did I make those choices in the first place? And the same answers seem to appear again and again. Fear, pressure, expectations, responsibility, other people's opinions. Honestly, it feels like they allowed far too many people to have a voice in decisions that should have belonged to their own heart. I see someone who spent a long time trying to make everyone happy, trying not to disappoint anyone, trying to keep everything under control. But the more they did that, the further they've drifted away from the things that actually brought them happiness. And they're beginning to see that now, very clearly. Something shifts when the Hierophant card appears. This feels like a different kind of maturity, not rebellious energy, not the need to prove anything. I'm seeing someone who has started thinking seriously about their future, seriously about the values they want to live by, seriously about the kind of life they genuinely want to build. And the more they think about those things, Taurus, the more your energy seems to appear in their mind. Not because of intense emotions, not because of fantasy, but because you represent something real, something steady, something dependable. I'm seeing them remember how it felt to be around you, the feeling of not needing to become someone else, not needing to perform, not needing to prove their worth, just being themselves. And wow, that's something they're appreciating now more than ever. This energy is showing me a choice beginning to form, slowly, but steadily. Not a choice between two people, a choice between two ways of living. One path continues to follow other people's expectations. The other follows what their heart genuinely wants. The energy becomes strongest when the Lover's card appears. I don't see the confusion that was here before. I don't see the constant hesitation. I see someone standing in front of their own truth. And for the first time, they're not looking away. Sure, there may still be fear. There may still be things they need to work through. But I no longer feel the energy of avoidance. I feel the energy of choice. A choice shaped by everything they've learned, everything they've lost, everything they've come to understand. And what stands out most is that they no longer want to live their life trying to satisfy everyone else. Because they're beginning to realize something important. If a decision makes the whole world happy, but leaves their own heart feeling empty, then maybe that isn't their path after all. And from that moment forward, I can feel a powerful clarity starting to emerge, like they're finally beginning to understand which direction they truly want to walk toward. I'm seeing a sense of peace here that wasn't present in the earlier parts of this story, not because every challenge has disappeared, not because every answer has suddenly arrived, but because this person has finally stopped fighting their own heart. This energy is showing me someone who no longer looks toward Taurus with confusion. No more mixed feelings, no more unanswered questions. I'm seeing them look at you with clarity, with appreciation, and with a genuine desire to build something that could stand the test of time. Something softens when the Empress card comes through. The energy becomes gentler, warmer, more open. I see the image of Taurus appearing very clearly in their mind, not as some distant dream, not as someone they're trying to win over, but as a place where they feel they can finally let their guard down, a place where they feel understood, accepted, free to be themselves. And honestly, it feels like they've gone through the same lessons over and over again in life, only to realize that what they've been searching for was never as complicated as they thought. A sense of safety, a sense of belonging, the feeling of sharing life with someone they genuinely trust. That picture becomes even clearer when the King of Pentacles card appears. I'm seeing them think about the future in a very practical way now. No more vague plans, no more passing fantasies. Instead, I'm seeing the simple things: a stable life, a home filled with laughter, peaceful mornings, long-term plans, goals built together. And what really stands out is that they're no longer drawn to things that only look impressive on the surface. They're no longer chasing temporary excitement. They're looking for something that can last. Something that remains steady with time. And every time they think about that kind of future, Taurus seems to appear in the picture. Not because you're perfect, but because you remind them that stability still exists, that sincerity still exists, that there are still people who mean what they say and follow through with their actions. Something shifts when the Four of Wands card comes through. Wow, this energy feels beautiful, not overwhelming, not dramatic, just real. It feels like after a very long journey, they're finally beginning to see where they want to belong. I'm seeing them imagine simple moments shared with Taurus, not grand events, not fairy tale scenes, just the little things: sharing a meal, having a conversation, holding hands. An ordinary day made meaningful because the right person is there beside them. Sometimes the simplest moments become the most valuable ones. And this person is beginning to understand that on a much deeper level now. This energy is showing me that they don't want to come back simply because they miss you, not because they're lonely. Not because emotions happen to resurface. It feels like they've lived through enough experiences to recognize the difference between something temporary and something real. And what they're reaching for now feels very different. Presence, stability, partnership, commitment. The energy becomes strongest when the Ten of Cups card appears. I feel like their heart is no longer chasing things outside of itself, no longer searching everywhere else for answers, no longer believing happiness exists somewhere far away. Instead, I'm seeing someone realize that what they've truly wanted may have been simpler than they once imagined. Someone to share life with, someone to grow with, someone to walk through different chapters of life beside them. And Taurus, you seem to appear in that vision, not as a fantasy, but as a possibility they genuinely want to explore with sincerity. You know, I really like the way this story closes, because it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel like it's making promises. It feels like someone who has learned a great deal from everything they've been through. Someone who has become more mature, more honest, more self-aware, and more ready. Ready to build instead of run. Ready to stay instead of disappear. Ready to choose instead of hesitate. And most of all, ready to appreciate something they once took far too long to truly recognize the value of. And I think that's where I'm going to leave this reading. Because, honestly, the strongest thing I've felt throughout this entire story isn't necessarily someone's return. It's growth. Growth that comes from loss. Growth that comes from lessons learned. And growth that comes from truths we eventually can no longer avoid. Maybe this person is very close to making an important decision. Maybe there are still a few steps left for them to take. Maybe some things are still quietly falling into place in their own time. But the energy I'm seeing here no longer feels like someone running away. It feels like someone learning how to show up, learning how to be honest, learning how to build something meaningful instead of only thinking about it. And if there's one thing I'd like to leave you with before we close this reading, it's this. Don't measure your value by how quickly someone else recognizes it. Because sometimes the most precious things are the things people take the longest to truly understand. So keep taking care of your own life. Keep building the things that bring peace to your heart. Keep becoming the most authentic version of yourself. And let the rest unfold in its own natural way. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly appreciate your presence here. And if this message resonated with you in any way, take what feels right for your journey and gently let the rest pass by. My name is Henry from Henry Sacred Tarot. I wish you nothing but peace and clarity on the road ahead. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this space with me. and I'll see you again in the next reading. Until then, take good care of yourself. Bye for now.